We really fell into this, and we had to learn about the industry and about the science and so forth. But what certainly made sense to me was that obviously there is a macrodosing approach which has its merits, and then there's microdosing. What I really liked about microdosing is that what I can see is that if we can create a substitute for antidepressant medications and other medications that we use to treat chronic pain and depression and anxiety and PTSD and all these sorts of things, and we can replace those medicines, and then the patient can then just take them in the same way as they take an antidepressant. That's not possible with macrodosing. So it kind of made sense to me, given the scale of the mental health crisis, that microdosing is scalable and it can be taken in a way that doesn't interrupt a person's day.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations. Today, we have Justin Hanka in the house. Welcome, Justin. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hi, Susan. Thanks for having me. Very pleased to be talking to you today.
I know after back and forth conversations, it's a morning for you. You're in Australia currently, right?
Yes, I live in Melbourne in Australia.
Great. So just to give a context about you and a background to our listeners, I'll just read a few lines of your bio, if that's okay. And then we can dive into your whole work. So you are a co-founder at MindBio Therapeutics, soon to be listed biotechnology company. I think you have been listed since then. So there is a conditional listing was going on. So I wanted to congratulate you on that as well. Pioneering research into novel psychedelic medicines to treat mental health conditions. And your company is an operator of a clinical stage drug discovery and development company specializing in microdosing of psychedelic medicines to treat a range of medical conditions. We'll have the full bio and your company's story and background and your mission in the show notes. But for now, please, can you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brings you to this work?
Well, it's quite interesting the way I fell into this work, Susan. I'm psychedelics naive, to be frank with you. A few years ago, we discovered this industry, my business partner and I. We work in investment banking and financing of these sorts of transactions. We take companies public. And we spun this company out of our investment funds in Australia. We discovered the early science, and I was just fascinated by really this concept of neuroplasticity, the ability of these substances, this small class of hallucinogens, to be able to change the way the brain works. And I was kind of romanced by that whole concept, and really I just took an interest in it. I've got a health interest, so was my business partner. And also, the escalating rates of mental health problems that we have pre-COVID, and then obviously what's happened during and post-COVID has really sort of inflated our interest. So much so that we spun this project out of our investment funds. I'm running it, and I've been traveling the world talking to people about microdosing. And to my surprise, actually, there are millions of people around the world that are medicinal microdosing. So I've certainly learned a lot. We're doing clinical trials. We've completed a phase 1 clinical trial, microdosing LSD in our company, and the data is fascinating.
Thank you so much for sharing. Why LSD? Because you're probably the only guest on our show now, up to now, talking about LSD and also providing, or at least doing the clinical trials on LSD, especially microdosing. So why LSD? Is there any personal connection to it, or is it something that, just came about through, whatever the discovery that you were on?
We really fell into this, and we had to learn about the industry and about the science and so forth. But what certainly made sense to me was that obviously there is a macrodosing approach which has its merits, and then there's microdosing. what I really liked about microdosing is that what I can see is that if we can create a substitute for antidepressant medications and other medications that we use to treat sort of, chronic pain and depression and anxiety and PTSD and all these sorts of things, and we can replace those medicines, and then the patient can then just take them in the same way as they take an antidepressant. That's not possible with macrodosing. So it kind of made sense to me, given the scale of the mental health crisis, that microdosing is scalable, and it can be taken in a way that doesn't interrupt a person's day. Now, the merits of LSD really are that, based on the science and the early science and the thesis of our scientists was, and they had a pretty good hunch about this, but what they know about LSD is that it's longer acting at the receptor, the HT2A receptor. It's just longer acting than psilocybin or any of the other hallucinogens. And so it just made sense as a good sort of candidate for testing in clinical trials. Now, as you know, clinical trials are incredibly expensive to run. They take a long time, and there's a lot of rigor. And one of the things we've been able to do, we're running like a world first clinical trial where we've been giving LSD in microdoses to patients who take it out in the community as part of our clinical trial. So we did that in a phase 1. And so the hypothesis was we didn't expect this in healthy individuals, really. A safety trial is really, phase 1 is a safety trial, but it was a very large safety trial, the largest that's ever been done in microdosing of LSD. So we put 80 healthy individuals through a phase 1, a randomized controlled clinical trial. They took doses over 6 weeks, a dose day, an off day and an off day, and a dose day, an off day, an off day, and a dose day. And we found that participants in the drug group, not the placebo group, had clinically significant responses in terms of increased levels of happiness, social connectivity, more energy, feelings of creativity, and enhanced feelings of wellness. And substantially above placebo effects. And we do see placebo effects in microdosing. And one of the big things that, prior to these trials, there's probably only half a dozen clinical trials of merit that have occurred in microdosing around the world. And none of them really were able to replicate what the user experience was. So we know from user reports, if you go to Reddit accounts, as people talk about microdosing, and there's a lot of information in the grey literature about people's experience microdosing LSD and psilocybin, and they all say the same thing. They feel sharper, they're more focused, they've got enhanced feelings of creativity. So we were able to replicate that in our clinical trials at a substantial level, and we're still sort of peeling the onion back on the data. There's a lot more data. This is just this top level psychometric data. There's all the pharmacokinetic data, all the DNA, all the brain scans, brain imaging. We've made some groundbreaking discoveries with microdoses in LSD, and we're just bringing that to a head. And over the coming months, we're looking forward to announcing some of these new discoveries, which have never been expected, but we've discovered them in our phase 1 trials.
Wow, that's fascinating, as always. I'm aware that lots of trials and research is being conducted currently, as you are aware of, mainly psilocybin and, lots of different microdosing even microdosing, for example. I am aware of this has been undertaken with ayahuasca and so many different psychedelic medicines. But with LSD, it's my first time I've heard, and this was the research. I think I've already checked out the paper as well. We can maybe link it to the show notes for our listeners if they're interested.
Sure.
The reason
we've got a very good summary. Got a very good summary of the trial results, and it's been published in a peer review journal. And we're really excited about that data because what it does is it's indicative of treating patients with depression. Because as we know, when people are, even when you're feeling a bit blue and a bit down, right, you're less socially connected. You've got lower energy. You're not feeling as well as you ordinarily would, and you don't feel creative. So the normal things that inspire you when you're depressed, patients in a clinical population, we're really excited about what this drug may be able to do for those patients. And also, we know that this LSD has been around for decades. It was discovered in the 30s, and by a Swiss chemist at Sandoz, Albert Hofmann. And then it was kind of used broadly in clinical science, in hospitals and so forth. And it was distributed widely to scientists and so forth. But it did get out of hand. recreationally. And unfortunately, the Nixon administration, they obviously banned it, and it was kind of, it was blacklisted around the world. So it really stopped all this great research. But over the last few years, we've been able to sort of reignite this research, and we know a lot more. We've got a lot more technology now to be able to understand what's going on in the brain and what's happening to people. And that's terrific, right? So we were all about the science. So I got into this because I was fascinated by the science and kind of romanced by the idea that, wow, maybe if we just invest in this, maybe we can change the world in some little way. And what we've seen with mental health over the last few years, we've got to do better. It's not right. I'm not sure what part of the world that most of your viewers are from, but in Australia, the youth suicide rates escalating, the rates of depression are increasing, and the state of the mental health of our youth is just appalling. So we've got to come up with better treatments. We've got to come up with better ways of living, probably more importantly, better ways of living and sort of, interacting with each other and the world and these sorts of things. And I believe the psychedelics have got a lot to say about all of that as well. So, the macrodosing approach and the teachings and the learnings, these profound experiences that people report when they're taking psychedelics, when they've had a therapy session, and particularly these sort of mystical experiences people have with psychedelics, what people learn when they come out of those experiences, I think can teach us more about better living. And so the drug itself, yes, we need better treatments, but I think we also need adjacent better living.
Yeah. Great insights. Thank you so much for that. And I'm really in awe about the whole, the legal system in Australia. You guys the country became the first in the world to legalize on prescription psilocybin, I believe, not long ago. And allowing LSD microdosing, because I believe it was done at home. Was it an at-home sort of microdosing protocol that the participants had to carry out, or was it what was the setup for the?
Well, it's really interesting. Really interesting. So we're domiciled in Australia, but the rules here are just probably worse than they are anywhere in the world up until recently. It's a Schedule 1 drug. It's deemed to be no medically known use and subject to misuse and abuse, as it is in New Zealand. But in New Zealand, we have a team of scientists, 20 pharmacologists, engineers, psychologists and so forth that are working on our clinical trials, and we managed to get an approval. It's the only approval in the world for take-home LSD in clinical trials, and we've been able to prove safety and efficacy in that phase 1 trial. Since then, we're fully funded to commence 2 phase 2 trials in New Zealand this year, and they're coming really excited about those. One's in depressed patients, and the other trial is in patients who have got end-of-life distress, and they're kind of at stage 3, stage 4 cancer. So we're really excited about those trials. But we're domiciled in Australia. We're doing clinical trials in New Zealand. We're about to go public in Canada on the Canadian Securities Exchange. We're not public yet, but very, very soon. So what's the date today? The 12th or 13th. We're not public yet. 12th of April, I think it is here. But in Australia, the rules have just been, it's been banned here. It's a banned substance, but recently they legalised it. So psilocybin and MDMA was medically legalised. It was quite a surprise. Everybody was shocked. So I think the whole system now is trying to catch up to these rules. I think it's a great thing. That it's got to start somewhere, and I guess all of the practitioners that are able to do this, they've got to obviously get through past the ethics standards, and I think all of the operational things will unfold over time. I don't expect there to be tens of thousands of patients being treated from the 1st of July when the rules change, but certainly it's a great step in the right direction. We're excited because we're very advanced in clinical trials. We've got a whole treatment intervention with our microdosing. Our microdosing protocol involves a safety protocol using digital therapeutics, which are fed back in real time to clinicians. So we're going to arrive with a sort of an intervention, a treatment that practitioners can just give, and it's scalable. And we're hoping that we'll be able to just roll that into Australia, which is almost 30 million population, much bigger market, on the back of these approvals.
Yeah, this is great. That's one of the reasons I asked you about the legal system, because we were shocked. I mean, I'm based in the UK, and UK has been a great hotspot for all of the trials and the research, and a lot of education has been coming from UK. And then suddenly Australia legalized on prescription. We were shocked to see that happening. But like you said, I guess there's a quickening in the processes of the legal system, like you said, maybe to catch up. And also maybe there is a rise in the mental health. I mean, the challenges are incredibly currently, especially the suicide rate, and everything is going up real fast in this post-pandemic era. I'm guessing there is a quickening in that kind of area of work. So the trials are happening in New Zealand. I just want to ask you one other thing. What happens after the phase 2? There will be a phase 3, I believe.
Yeah, so we're doing sort of a staged phase 2, phase 2A, B in the depression trials. And then we'll obviously assess where the data is at and our protocols, and to see whether they've been effective in the patient population. And then obviously we'll be, if we're seeing a replica of the sort of data we've seen in our phase 1 trials, it's certainly indicative of approaching the regulators immediately to have the drug fast track through the system, because we already know the toxicology of this substance has been around for decades. We'll have a fully medicalised protocol. We've gone through 3 major clinical trials, and so what we're seeing in Australia is the regulator has been willing to approve psilocybin basically on the back of a phase 2 trial, and really probably the most substantive data is the Imperial College data, which is a few years old now, and then also they've on the back of the data from the phase 3 MAPS trials. So it's quite interesting that the regulator's been willing to fast track ahead of sort of any kind of FDA higher regulator approval. It said, look, we understand these substances are showing potential in clinical trials. They show better potential than the current available options, being a whole range of antidepressants, which arguably don't work in the way we'd expect them to. And so I think it's a terrific decision. I think it's a very brave decision of the government's. There's a lot of work to do from practitioners and psychiatrists, and the Board of Psychiatry and so forth in Australia need to kind of build the protocols around this. They need to get practitioners up to speed. And then also there's kind of this affordability issue that's going to occur. The problem with macrodosing is that really it's a profound experience for patients. It's a whole intervention. It's a day off work, probably a whole week off work. It's going to be very expensive. And then there's this whole integration piece, which will occur over time. Now, that's fine, but it's very disruptive to a person's life. Now, if someone's suicidal and they're in such a level of trauma, and that is the intervention that works, well, then we have to get them those treatments. Preferably, we get them those treatments for no cost at all. In Australia, our Medicare system is very good. So if these drugs get approved on the system, they will become affordable, which is what we want to see.
I understand that. And this is the mission of the company, to really bring that to the people.
Certainly with microdosing.
Is it just through microdosing? Is that how the company is kind of working towards the microdosing protocol? Because when it becomes approved, so there's the patient then will be on a microdose prescription.
That's correct. There's a whole protocol around the microdosing. So we're a company that is solely focused on the microdosing of psychedelics. So whether it be psilocybin, LSD, or any other analog, we're developing a matrix of data based on what we see in our clinical trials and all of the data we're getting back from wearables and our technology and our associated applications that follow the patient around. So it's not just the drug, it's a whole treatment intervention and a whole model around being able to give a person a mobile treatment. So it's kind of almost a mobile therapist that's going out with them with their microdosing protocols. So, we're testing this in the trials as well. We've adapted it from what we've learned in our phase 1, and we're running into a phase 2 trial with a protocol we know that works. They're clinically proven, that using the digital therapeutics we're using. And we're hoping, obviously, it's going to be a lot easier for people to take a microdose, because it's not disruptive. They can just take a dose. It's sub-hallucinogenic. Mind you, it's not always sub-perceptual, because people can tell when they're taking the drug, right? It's on dose day is a very good day, even with a small dose of this substance. And you see this in user reports. You hear I love reading the mums the mums and psychedelics and mums and microdosing. Those fascinate me. Those articles. There's so many going around. Well, there's no surprise, because what we see in the data, certainly microdosing of LSD, people have got more energy, they're happier, they're feeling more socially connected. We've done thousands of post-treatment interviews, and we're running analytics over that data. So we're understanding all the, doing machine learning and AI over those using all the words and all the themes that are coming up in thousands of hours of discussions. And it's fascinating what people say. So even with a microdose, we're hearing this. People are feeling almost one of the comments made by a participant was they feel like they're in a tunnel when they're talking to someone. They're connected. They're actually properly connected to the person they're talking to, and they're able to be more present. We've got sort of husbands and wives sort of reflecting on, I feel closer to my partner, I feel more intimate, I feel more bonded. And these things are really terrific themes that are coming up, right? So we've got this information. We knew this from the grey literature. People know this. The mums and microdoses know it. The dads and microdoses know it. People who are doing this around the world know it. But unfortunately, in Australia at the moment, if you were to go out and forage and pick a mushroom that contains psilocybin and bring it home with you, that's illegal to do that. It's a criminal offence. And so that's quite a shame, really, that these things are sort of derived from nature, but they've kind of been banned from our use. It's quite bizarre, really. I mean, we're preventing this wonderful sort of gift from nature from helping us and healing us. So we're really focused on, and certainly in Australia, it's a very conservative place here. We were worried about talking about LSDs and investment in the financial districts. We thought we'd be laughed out of the room. But it turns out we weren't. People kind of saw the merits of it. But certainly there were still some of those stigmas before the Michael Pollans of the world came along, and the Paul Stamets and the fantastic fungi, and kind of this romance that people have been taken on through the visuals of psychedelics and mushrooms and what they can do, and also the science. But our job really is to get to the science quicker. Once we have the data, you can't dispute the data. The data is the data, and particularly if it's done under the scientific protocols that provide that rigor. So that's our job here, and so we're really encouraged from the data we've seen. We just want to get through phase 2 and then get these treatments out to people.
It's really compelling, isn't it? The microdosing results. I mean, the data of the James Fadiman, as you may know, I think your protocol also is the James Fadiman's protocol, the 1 day on and the 2 days off, right? He has incredible amounts of data on the anecdotal results that people have been sharing with him. And one thing I wanted to just kind of come back to the thread that you said, it's illegal to pick a mushroom off the ground, and you'll be criminalized for that. Isn't that bizarre? Because as much as that could be the law, but we know that people are always picking mushrooms, right? There are picking seasons in the year, and they're always going out there. I mean, especially in the UK, there are lots of groups out there that tell you how to do it and where to go and among themselves. I mean, it's happening underground. It's always has happened, and it's always going to happen, right? That's just a bizarre thing.
It is absolutely bizarre, really. I mean, I know. I mean, I have a European background, and it's a very sort of Central European tradition to go foraging for mushrooms and berries and things like that. So I was taught by my father, and I had that experience as a child and growing up. And certainly, obviously, he would have known. He taught us which mushrooms to pick and which ones to leave alone. He would have known something about those mushrooms that we weren't allowed to pick. But certainly, we've seen that. We've seen some of this. I've seen some YouTube videos of some young people foraging for mushrooms in one particular state of Australia, and the police actually arriving, number one, because it was private property, but number two, obviously warning them that what they were picking was illegal for them to be possessing that substance. So it's a grand shame, really, that we have these bizarre rules, but I guess they're there to protect us. I think that's what they're supposed to do, and to protect people. And the only way we can really tackle this, I think the best way we can tackle this, is to bring data to the table in the most sensible way possible, and also not to make any fantastic claims about what this does, because we want to make sure that this works and it's not harmful. And we know that people are doing this at home, but we don't really know, what are the long-term effects? Where's the data on all this? And so we do. You're right. The Fadiman book. I mean, he's sort of the instigated all of this excitement. And you're right. Our scientists really looked at that protocol and said, okay, that's interesting. This is what people are doing at home. This is what people are saying about it. Well, let's try and replicate that in a rigorous kind of randomized control clinical trial environment. And that's certainly what they've done. We've learnt some fascinating things with some groundbreaking new discoveries, and that we're really excited about, because these discoveries really indicate, treatment of more conditions, and we think this is going to be a groundbreaking treatment for depression.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I'm really excited about the microdosing as a protocol, as the way to bring it into the Western model. I think microdosing is the frontier for the Westerners, for those of us that are not so connected to the indigenous roots of our, where we came from, and we have this hyped up, modern lives. We have to run around chasing whatever we need to chase, and then this busyness and all this kind of noise, where we don't have time to reflect and listen to ourselves. I think microdosing is definitely the frontier of in the mental health, especially for well-being, for general well-being, and I'm excited about that. And I'm a advocate of the microdosing as well. What really fascinates me is just in that I know we've been learning a lot more about the mushroom microdosing, just because we have figures like Dr. James Fadiman and also Paul Stamets, and all these people have been in this for a long time. And then we have Terence McKenna of the past, all of these people have been talking about mushrooms. However, it's kind of, the reason I'm sharing this with you is it's almost acceptable with the psilocybin, but somehow I sense there is a lot more stigma around LSD. And there are still people calling it a man-made lab drug. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
It's an interesting topic to discuss, really. So there's a very small class of these hallucinogens that have this effect on the brain, and our cognition and thinking and our mood and so forth. And so LSD was discovered in the lab, but it's derived from a fungus. So it's quite fascinating to me how fungi, whether it be mushrooms or whether it be even things like penicillin, this kind of anything that kind of grows, there's been molds and fungi and so forth. So anyway, there's a fungi that grows on rye wheat. It's called the ergot fungus, and that fungus, the LSD, is derived from the ergot fungus. And ergot's already been used as a substance called ergotamine, and they use it to treat migraine headaches. And so it is. There are two chemical steps away from the ergot fungus to get it to LSD, but certainly it's derived directly from nature. And also, it's quite interesting, the ergot fungus itself was disastrous for people's health. It caused all sorts of terrible health problems to people that came in contact with it, centuries ago, when there was no treatment for it, and people didn't understand what was happening when they were eating bread and wheat that had this fungus on it. It was causing all sorts of physical ailments and problems. On the flip side, though, we can create these wonderful healing substances from it, and we don't really know how or why. It's just really nature has turned up with its goodness and showed us how to do this. So I think it's a blessing. I think all of these substances are an absolute blessing to have them, and it would be wrong of us to ignore what they are doing and the potential. So the window and the door's open for us, and so we should discover it carefully, cautiously. I think caution is good, but to me, this seems like there is no harm in pursuing this, because the side effects of LSD when people take microdoses are, people don't gain weight as they do with an antidepressant. Let's look at the side effects of antidepressants: weight gain, dry eyes, dry mouth, sexual side effects, substantial side effects, gastrointestinal effects, nausea, diarrhea. These sorts of things are really, disruptive, and they kind of cause secondary health problems in people. And it's just bizarre to me that those side effects are considered to be appropriate when, I'm depressed. If I'm depressed and I go and see a doctor, and the doctor says, well, here's a pill, it may help. There's a chance it'll help your depression. It might not, but you'll absolutely, certainly gain weight if you don't watch what you're eating. and you'll probably have gastrointestinal side effects, and you'll probably have sexual side effects. And I don't see how that is going to be good for a person. And so that's the puzzling thing that I sort of, my business partner and I, we challenge this. We're saying, well, that looks ridiculous. And then there's no way of actually, when a person comes in with presenting with depression, there's no way of actually targeting a person with a medicine they're just randomly given. The start might be Prozac, and then they go to Zoloft and Effexor, and then all the rest of the drugs. Right? There's a merry-go-round of these drugs that people go on. If one doesn't work, they cycle to the next, and there's no merit for why one would work over the other. It's just trial and error. But I think the trial and error is disastrous for people's health. You talk to anyone about this.
Exactly. Gosh, there's so much I can say about this. Like, we call them psychedelic shoppers. You probably meet them as well. They try every single thing as quick, as fast as possible, as much as possible. But it's like somehow, I guess it's the education part, Justin, right? So your company, what are the things that you guys are, formulating or creating structures around the education piece? I feel like that's the biggest missing puzzle piece, because even with the LSD, I speak to lots of people, and there is a massive pushback towards LSD. Somehow they're more open to the mushrooms, the psilocybin, for whatever reason, maybe because it's just kind of subliminally, it's always been there on the ground growing. So it's kind of like it's there, and we kind of okay with that. But then, there are a lot of people pushing back this LSD idea. And I understand there is a missing piece of the education, because yes, we do know that there are lots of people making quick buck from LSD, probably compromised chemicals sprayed or laced with so many different things. I guess we're talking about educating the community, educating public around what is the pure LSD consist of, where does it come from, like you said, derivative of an ergot, another fungi, and then the use of it, the whole system, the structure. So do you find that difficult? Because
not at all. We take it's interesting. It's a really interesting concept that you talk about, and so we're just curious, and we're naturally curious about this. So I arrived into this company, and I created this company with my business partner on the basis that we would try and discover something and find out more about this, and we need to. So we want to bring the science to a head. And I find those comments about LSD fascinating. And we may arrive with the data that says, hey, this is completely safe to use. With these conditions, with these caveats, as with any medicine, anything you're putting into body, anything that changes your cognition, your thinking, your mood, it's going to have some residual side effects, right? So one of those things we see when people take this is a sort of a jitteriness, like they've had too many cups of coffee in the morning. That's one problem that we see when people, even with small doses. So this has to be done with caution. I embrace all of that commentary, because I think it just feeds into, if we're able to bring the data to the table, well, then those discussions then are a lot easier to have, because we can then point to the data. The problem with data, though, is that it's just data. They're just endpoints. And so you can read into why one thing might be the case over another thing. So there is sort of an interpretation of some of the data, which is we also understand that. But with the testing that we've seen, the well-founded psychometric tests that have been done for decades, and they are the standard for assessing a person's mood. We do know that there is a huge bump in mood data on dose days from very small doses of LSD. But the commentary I'd make about, so people who are sort of maybe a bit worried about LSD or there's a pushback, I certainly haven't felt it. And I run a company that's focused on doing clinical trials. Maybe I'm mixing in the wrong circles, but certainly I've traveled the world, do speeches all over the world. And I was quite surprised. I've had people waiting for me after the speeches I do, and they'll kind of crying and hugging me and just telling me about how LSD's changed their life. Now, the problem with doing this recreationally or kind of medicinally microdosing at home is you don't know the source of these drugs, right? And that's the problem with this. And I can tell you now, because I've seen the production process. I've held 100,000 doses of LSD. I know what it looks like. I know what the medical grade LSD looks like. I've seen 1 million microdoses. I'm about to do a post on and show you people what 1 million microdoses look like. That process is arduous to get the pure form of LSD. It's rigorous, it's arduous, it's done in clinically controlled conditions. And that's really important. So we don't advocate for that people are going to be doing this now. I know people are doing it, but certainly there's a huge risk because you don't know who, all of the bad actors that might be, lacing these drugs with other substances. So we're not about the recreational use. We're about just getting the data, and we'll front up with the data, and we'll be able to say, if you're taking pure LSD, this is what it looks like, and this protocol, and you're doing these things, you've got a good chance of feeling better if you're not feeling well, you're depressed or so forth. That's what we want to turn up with. So I'm really conscious of making any statements that are not, not founded in the data that we're seeing. But what we see is that people who are taking LSD in the community, they feel better, they feel more focused, they feel sharper, they feel more creative. And we've replicated that data and some in a phase 1 trial.
Thank you for sharing this and clarifying the mission of the company, because I'm, speaking to so many different people, it's like the world is kind of divided into two psychedelic communities some call themselves, the entheogenic sort of advocates who just, take the plant medicines, entheogenics, like the mushrooms, ayahuasca. And then there are the whole nother people just doing recreational LSD and MDMA and other kind of, which they call it the lab drugs and so on and so forth. So I really appreciate your sensitivity and also what you're trying to create and bring as data so that a lot of people can benefit from it. And then maybe that's how we're going to counterforce, come in with lots of data, lots of research. This is the only way out, I guess, in terms of bringing the psychedelic education, right? This is what we need right now.
I think it goes beyond the psychedelics education, and sort of I listen to this really, I'm quite puzzled by the factions that sort of develop one way or another on anything. I actually think all of it's necessary. I think all of the indigenous conversation is absolutely necessary. I think the drug development is absolutely necessary. I think really bringing all of the classics to understand what the classics are doing is absolutely. That's what we're doing. Certainly with microdosing, we need to get all that data and bring that to a head. We are interested in psilocybin. We'll be introducing psilocybin in microdosing into our trials. We believe that our hypothesis is some people may respond better to psilocybin than they do LSD or any other compound as well. So we're building this kind of matrix of data in microdosing. We'll be able to check that, cross-reference that against a person's DNA, against their medical profile, their psychometric data, all their biological data that we collect using wearables. And so it's a data play for us. But also, I think, you're right about this education piece. So as we find out more, we're cautiously communicating what we know. But I also believe that, we have a responsibility, knowing what we know about these medicines, to teach more. This is not just about a drug. A drug is not going to fix our mental health crisis. And if anyone thinks that, or anyone's promoting that concept, they'd be just, it's a fraudulent concept, really. The pill is required to because we don't have the treatments at the moment. When someone's in trauma, when someone's suffering, we need to get them out of that trauma as quickly as possible and get them integrated into their world and get them operating better. I think fundamentally people need to change the way that they live, the way they care for themselves, from their nutrition to exercise to getting balance of all these things that are good for us. We need to change our interactions with the environment and the way we take care of the environment and the way we take care of each other. So I think this kind of holistic view, I believe, is, we run companies that have got a global stage now, so we can have a huge influence in the way that people are educated and the things that we're teaching people. And certainly what we're trying to do, and you may have seen the work that I'm doing with social media and so forth, we're trying to educate and trying to offer something more than just, this is a drug that's going to change the world. No, it's not. It's going to change the way that we treat people. Hopefully it's going to be a better way, a safer, more tolerable medication when we get there. But we want to send a better message. We want to educate people because, the governments are trying to do this and they're failing. We've got all sorts of medical interventions. We've got millions of dollars that have been raised and offered up by the governments around the world to try to tackle mental health crisis. But I think probably the best thing I've seen is actually prescribing nature. That to me, that is the right methodology. Get people, centered within themselves. If they're still struggling, well, then perhaps a medicine might assist. And so we're thinking that the microdoses, when people are kind of at that, when the person first goes to a doctor and says, "Hey, doctor, I'm not feeling quite right. My relationship's failing. I'm not motivated at work. I've lost my creativity. I can't write the way I used to." We're hoping that this might be a bump for them, a way to kind of get them into a headspace where they can operate well again. But really, if people want to change their life, they have to change their whole life, not just the drugs that they're taking.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I like what you said earlier about the SSRIs causing so much more side effects and symptoms that have been normalized. We've kind of normalized it to be okay. All of these side effects that are actually in itself is a problem going forward. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And there will be side effects. Sorry, yeah, the reality is there will be side effects with any medication we take because it's a foreign, substance, really, I guess, and particularly when they're having such profound impacts on these receptors in our brain and so forth. So we're going to find this same problem with psychedelics, right? There are side effects with psychedelics, and the main side effect is hallucinations and profound changes in thinking and cognition and mood and so forth. It just happens that experience can be transformative for the way a person feels and the way they process their traumas and things. And as I said, even with LSD microdosing, it's got to be done cautiously because a small subset of people who microdose feel these feelings of jitteriness. And we had to remove a few people from the trials because they just couldn't tolerate that feeling of agitation. So we do see agitation when people take some antidepressants because of that natural stimulation. You want people stimulated. That's the active thing here. But that's not always tolerated for people. So the reality is there is always going to be a side effect with any drug, anything that's going to have a major change. There will be some kind of residual effects. The key is that are there any real adverse events that are worthy of that are important and that may merit not introducing the drug. So we haven't seen any adverse events in our clinical trials to date, and that's good. But we need to do more work on this, and we're motivated to do so.
That's brilliant. Do you get any pushback? Because lately, I'm speaking with a lot of people who are in the sort of shamanic or spiritual or indigenous models of working with the medicines, and there is kind of like this division, especially those companies who try to take away the psychedelic effect of the hallucinogens, just create novel psychedelics without these effects. And I see a lot of discussions and lots of arguments are going on between these sides. Do you get any kind of comments with the work that you're doing and your company, for that matter?
Yeah, I think it's a really good topic of interest, and certainly we have got a lot to be grateful for what our Indigenous peoples have offered us and brought to the table in terms of the learnings around psychedelics. It's derived from that place. And so much so that in our clinical trials, which have been conducted in New Zealand has a very large Indigenous population, the Maori population. And so we've consulted with the Maori, the Indigenous New Zealanders to obviously bring that cohort into the trials, because we have to randomise, different cultures, different genders, different education levels, all these sorts of things are quite complicated the way the proper randomisation process goes. But we're very respectful of this process, and one of the most probably beautiful things that I've seen amongst our scientists is they've brought in an Indigenous consultant to consult to the clinical trials and to bring the face of the Indigenous people to ensure that we're fronting up with the right methodologies. And one of the most fascinating things I've seen is the clinical trial rooms being blessed by Indigenous leaders. So we're really aware of these things. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's all. I think we need to bring all of this to head. We need to understand what the Indigenous cultures have created. We need to understand that medically, and we need the data on that. And then also, there's nothing wrong with the big, pharma companies creating novel drugs. If they work and they're better off with them, well, then that's a good thing. So, but yeah, we've embraced that. I don't really feel much pushback at all because I don't come with any agenda other than I want to change the course of mental health. We'll hope we'll get there along the way. We want to, perhaps people change people's minds around the use of these medicines. We absolutely should respect the Indigenous cultures and what they've brought, but that's why we're doing this. It's because of them, and they've taught us all what to do. So why would we not embrace that with wholeheartedly? So we have in our trials. I believe we'll be the only phase 2 clinical trial in the world that has clinical trial rooms blessed by Indigenous elders. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, it sounds lovely. Yeah, that's amazing. Definitely.
Not my idea. That's the credit of our scientists, and just an amazing thing to watch and experience. So there's only good that can come from doing that.
Sure, absolutely.
Certainly won't do any harm.
I think so. At the moment, as Rick Doblin says, the world is in crisis in the mental health. The situation is really bad, and we need to use everything, all hands on deck, right? We need to bring however we can to get out of this, because nothing has been created or developed since the 40, 50 years now. SSRIs is the only latest thing that we've come up with, and things needs to change for sure.
It's interesting you talk about the MAPS, Rick Doblin and the MAPS studies, and it's just incredible what he and his team have done. It's taken so long and so much money, and it's a very narrow, it's MDMA for PTSD, all of that time and effort. And we're all looking forward to those approvals because it certainly will open the door to the other psychedelic medicines being sort of embraced in the medical community, particularly in the US. But you just can see the effort and that's been required to get there. It's quite the shame, simply because that drug saves lives. It's saving people's lives. It's preventing suicide. So, perhaps we should not wait as long to get the other drugs in. And so I, applaud the Australian government for being the first government in the world to medically legalise these substances and then say to the medical profession, well, here you go. It's legalised. It's legal now. You go create the protocols that will work. The commercial system will figure out how to commercially bring these substances in, and then obviously to make them affordable. And price will work itself out in using market forces. And hopefully the governments will intervene to have these subsidised, because that's the optimum thing to have here, is that the drugs are subsidised so they're affordable and people who need them can access them.
Yeah, great. This is incredible. Okay, I have just last few questions before we let you go, as we're coming to the end of our conversation. So going public, what does that entail, and why is it important for your company?
So going public is it's a profound experience for a company and its shareholders and so forth. And certainly our aim in taking MindBio Therapeutics public in Canada is really to give us sort of access to the much larger North American markets. It truly makes us a global company. Then it gives us a global platform to discuss this important issue of mental health. We have hundreds of shareholders through Australia, North America, and also through Europe. So we'll be also listing the company on the Frankfurt Exchange. And the pathway really is we get access to early stage venture capital. The North American markets are a little different to Australia. There are a number of exchanges, and the Canadian Securities Exchange is very open to this kind of concept of early stage venture capital to support early stage companies, and particularly doing this kind of clinical research and development work on drug development and so forth. And it's very supportive of that. And then we get access to the large North American markets. The natural passports are into the larger exchanges, the tier 1 exchanges, and the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. That's the dream. That's kind of the pathway that we're wanting to take.
Okay, brilliant. And congratulations and all the best with that. As last words of wisdom, what would you like to share with our listeners? what is there anything burning that's waiting for you to share with our listeners? Because this is going to be a quite interesting topic for all of them. What would you like to say?
Well, yes, if it's about microdosing, well, look, the data looks good, and the people that have been doing it are right, we believe, from the data sets we've seen. But also, I think if any of the listeners are experiencing mental health problems, or are struggling in one way, shape, or form, there are so many things that people can do in their lives, their day-to-day lives, to change the way they feel. And now we've got all this information online and so forth. The good information, there is good information there. And I think probably the strongest recommendation that I can give to anyone is, if you're not feeling quite yourself, go out and connect with nature. Go and spend some time walking in nature and trying to connect and being centered and grounded in nature.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's my advice.
Always, yeah, it is. It's the staple of the holistic well-being, right? It's great advice. Yeah. Thank you so much, Justin, for all the work that you and your company are doing. It's been such a pleasure having you here and talking and learning about your projects. And lastly, your current project that you are undertaking right now, apart from the phase 2 trials, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, just connect with us, connect with me if you like. If you find microdosing and this work interesting, you can follow my message on LinkedIn. Just follow my name on LinkedIn and just follow the work, I think, and get behind. Really, we're advocates of changing mental health, full stop, right? And it just happens that we're creating a novel drug, and we're exploring the data on microdosing, and it looks good. So if you're interested in changing the way we do mental health, jump on board.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. Your LinkedIn profile is really impressive. There is a lot of people that are engaging and liking and commenting what you have to share. So that's amazing to see. So congratulations.
No, thank you. It's been quite a surprise to us, and it just makes me realise that's the responsibility we have, is to share a good, positive message about all of this. Whilst we get at the data and we arrive with the science. So once we have strong phase 2 data, our message will be a whole lot louder than it is now. But we're really pleased with the support that we're getting, and want to thank everyone for the support. And as I said, if you're struggling with your mental health, there are so many things you can do. Reach out to your friends and family for help, reconnect with nature, and all these things. Look at your diet, get some exercise. These are all the things that we can do right now if you're struggling.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you so much, and looking forward to maybe having you back later
Susan.
in the year, just to kind of follow up on what's been happening and follow your journey and your company. So thank you again.
Many thanks for having me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. Please do get in touch with me or Justin, or share anything. If you have any kind of experience with microdosing, do share in the comments, and don't be shy. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.